Hello again, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Fun and Games Podcast. I'm Jeff Moonen,
And I am Matt, a.k.a. Stormageddon.
and this episode we are joined by one of our brethren of a certain POV. We have Case Aiken here. Thank you for being on the show with us.
Hey guys, good to hear you.
And Matt, why don't you introduce this one?
Sure. So something that I was thinking about recently, and the last time I experienced it was with actually Arkham Knight for the PS4. We hit this stride with difficulty in video games where probably around the 2000s you could for the most part always choose your difficulty, but there was really this sense of giving people a break in gaming in the 2000s and beyond, especially with a lot of story-driven games. We would allow for an adjustment in difficulty setting, but there was this weird, start to trend of hiding things behind difficulty. Now, sometimes it was something as simple as extra weapons or additional content, another game mode, which all sort of makes sense. But as games became more story driven, there would be complete endings. Like, certain games you couldn't see the final ending, the full breadth of the story, unless you 100% completed everything, which for the most part is fine. But then it became you couldn't complete things and get the final bits of the story if you didn't 100% complete things on the hardest difficulty.
And that is definitely that's a hurdle, because
Yeah.
I certainly know why we've come at this for so long. Video games and certainly home gaming it draws its lineage from the arcade, and you want people to put in more quarters. You want people to keep throwing themselves up the Sisyphusian hill of the high score, of the complete loop, of any of that. And so early, you had your NES, your SNES, and any of those where you want people to keep playing, and you didn't make a long game. So you wanted to make a hard game, so people kept throwing themselves at it. And in home consoles, you sort of had unlimited credits unless you gave limited continues, and you want people to play the whole thing. Well, if you beat it when it's too easy, the example I'm thinking of right now is Turtles in Time on the SNES. If you didn't beat it at the hardest difficulty, you didn't get to play all the levels. Now, that's all well and good for a very arcade-based experience. I don't know anybody that's playing Turtles in Time for the deep story, social commentary, or narrative. But you're right, Matt. Nowadays, we are looking at more story-driven games, and I feel that there is a place for certain things to be held behind difficulty, but not everything. It's something that we need to parse.
Well, yeah, so I think the ultimate question that I want to discuss today is it fair or unfair to lock storyline behind difficulty, or things to complete a game experience behind difficulty? Because this idea that, especially in the YouTube generation, if you can't spend the 80 hours 100% completing a game, you're just going to look up the final cutscene on YouTube, watch it, and be done. And so even that doesn't seem to make a lot of sense. But this idea that we're punishing people who are not good at games doesn't really make sense when we want games to be accessible. Now, there are plenty of games that don't do this, but it's kind of hand in hand with the idea that the live system has become obsolete. There are some games that still utilize it, or like re-releases that utilize it, but for the most part, if you play a game and die, you just pick up at a checkpoint and keep playing. There's no lives. You can't only do that a certain amount of times. It's part of the autosave generation. But I think like that, this idea of walling off integral game content behind difficulty seems a little messed up, because you're literally punishing the people who are not great at games,
Or who don't have the time to put in to become, ace level on whatever this game genre or style is. It's because a lot of this is time. Gaming is a skill, and time does, skill is rewarded from time.
Yeah, I like time is a good thing to bring up, because that's the key objection I have to this trend, and why I'm kind of happy that they, at least in my experience, have sort of moved away from it. But definitely in the 2000s, that was a big thing. Because as games get longer, the idea of replaying it at a harder difficulty becomes much more daunting, because It's not just, oh, I could beat it in an afternoon if on easy mode and probably over the course of a day on a hard mode. It's, oh, I could beat this in 2 weeks on easy mode, or I could beat this over the course of 3 months on hard mode.
Yeah, and that's assuming you start on hard mode. You can start it on easy, then get good at it and do it again and again and again. And hey, there are games and experiences that for some people, it's I can play this forever. Whatever time I have, I will give to this. And that's fantastic. It is. But not every game, not every person.
Yeah, I feel like there's different tiers of this. I mean, there's games where they give like little bonuses if you beat it on a really hard mode or under really hard difficulties.
Something cosmetic.
Like the Metroid example is sort of a good one for that from the early days of video game, where like if you beat it within a certain time, you get a reward that is different than if you beat it in a longer time. But it's a better ending, but you're still getting a full ending in that scenario.
And you're also getting a full experience in the game.
Right. So if you get games where you have to play through it, and you play through it, and especially if you're not aware of this, where you're like, I mean, it's one thing for easy mode, you could probably make an argument for, but like when it's like medium or even hard difficulty, and that's still not the full ending, that seems kind of insane to me. Where like you get to it, and it's like, oh, you can't play levels, and you can't see like crucial content, especially for a story-driven game. That's just punitive for the sake of trying to like. I don't want to say nickel and dime because that's not the right term here, but to stretch out your game design component, because like the hard factor to like lengthen the game is there, just like anything that forces a replay is there.
Well, yeah, I would argue though even easy is a punishment, if you're limiting stuff, because take a game like Mass Effect or Dragon Age or The Witcher, games that have these huge universes that thrive with storyline. If you're someone who likes story but isn't great at a first-person shooter, but you want to still see Mass Effect, which I found more common than other games, people experiencing it that way, if you make it so they can't see the full ending on easy, which thankfully they don't, you'd be really hurting that entire franchise, because it's all based on decisions and experience and like actually experiencing the game. And so if they were to hide any of that behind a difficulty wall, you would really be ruining the whole experience.
Yeah, I agree. And for big games, like, there's no excuse at any difficulty level. I guess I was thinking for more, like, not straight shot games, because I'm not talking about, like, just like a Contra or something, but, like, games where it's still, like, a more singular experience where the game is more the driver than the story. Like, Mass Effect, you could argue, is as much, if not more, story.
Right, and there are games where it's more arcade style. You can still have a live system in games nowadays, but you are making a very certain kind of game when you do that.
Yeah, you're making a choice to do that versus it used to be they would put in live systems even if they didn't need live systems.
Right.
Like, it used to just be like, here's all the conventions of gaming, and we're just going to do it. And now at least like people are starting to be like, well, here's why we're doing it.
And even sometimes really messing with the conventions of, because we expect it to be one way, and that allows them to pull the rug out from under us. Which is, I feel, one of the strengths in whether it's an adjustment in difficulty or anything in a story-driven game or a gameplay-driven game, any sort of narrative, the Ludo narrative, is the discoveries you make while you play it. While, yes, we can go watch the 100% completion ending, we didn't get there. And I enjoy in games like BioWare games or Metal Gear or any of those where you are rewarded for not necessarily great skill. Sometimes you are, but you're rewarded for great perseverance or an interesting thought. There's all sorts of radio conversations and permutations and conversations that can only happen if you're in a certain place with certain people, or you do this at a certain time. If you think to do that, there's nothing challenging per se. It's not testing your reflexes, but it is allowing you to go about and experience the story at your pace and discover new things. And I feel those are pretty interesting because it's not just to look up, okay, Mass Effect 3 ending. Most people are looking up commentary on that anyway. But yeah, with story-driven games nowadays, there is far more to be gained from people being able to complete the story. And it's up to you what you find of that.
Well, yeah, I think also what really, what I think works well for this is something like the Resident Evil games have always rewarded you if you beat the game or beat the game on a harder difficulty. They give you items that break the game, essentially, because they want to reward you. Like they give you an unlimited rocket launcher, or they give you a machine gun with unlimited bullets, or a new outfit that works as armor so you can't die. Like, that kind of stuff I think makes sense, and to hide that behind a harder difficulty makes sense because that's a reward for suffering through
The
that
survival
difficulty.
horror. Yeah.
Right.
It's a game where you're supposed to like conserve your ammo and worry about this and that. And if you do a good enough job, it's not like, oh, you need this. It's go play. Like you've survived, you've done this game. Now just bust heads. Yeah, those sort of rewards, those ones that like, all right, I've done every last thing. I've beaten the hardest bosses in this game. I have devoted hundreds of hours, and now I get the strongest weapon ever. Like, I even think about Sonic 3 and Knuckles. You play through the whole game. You get Supersonic. You get to the Knuckles levels. You get all the Super Emeralds. You get to be Hypersonic. You do the Doomsday Zone, and you now have a full clear file. And you can go to any level and at any point become hypersonic. You get the 50 rings and off you go. And it's fun. It's great. It's very, like, satisfying. I remember the first time I did it, I was laughing like a lunatic, like, just from the sheer power of it all. But I didn't play through the whole game with that. I didn't, like, it's not like I explored every nook and cranny. It was a nice reward. But, yeah, that, like, those sort of, like, big break the game, hide that behind something hard. That's fine. Cosmetic bonuses? Sure. Because then you can have the fancy hat that says, I'm a rough boy that does all the hard difficulties, and I can do it, and you can't. Haha, here's my hat. But, yeah, to hide content, it's, I don't feel like we're there anymore.
Well, what made me think of this actually is as of when we're recording this, the Steam summer sale just ended this past week. And of course I bought like 9 games for $65 because it's Steam. And one of the games I got, well, 3 of them actually, are the 3 games that came out in the Lords of Shadow Castlevania series. Because after playing Bloodstained, I was hungering for more Castlevania-related stuff. And I remember playing the first Lords of Shadow game and going, this is okay, but I don't love it, so I wanted to go back to it. It was the same problem I'd had with Bayonetta, which I mentioned recently, is that modern hack and slashers are so reliant on twitch reflexes that they get impossible to play. So I bought those games because I wanted to play all of them. And when I started up a new playthrough of Lords of Shadows Ultimate, which is the first game, I put it on the easy difficulty because I wanted to see the story. I wanted to get through all of these games and experience it. I didn't care so much about the difficulty, but I was hesitant at first. I did research online because I was afraid I was going to be locked out of certain things for choosing the easy mode, because those are the kinds of games that really restricted that. Action, adventure, and platformer games are the ones that often restricted access to stuff if you took the easy way out, as it were. And so it ingrained in me this habit where I'm curious if other people have the same habit, but I always play games on normal because in my head I'm like, well, for certain games, it's like I can handle the challenge I want to play on normal. But for other games, I'm like, this is going to be too hard, but I really want to suffer through normal so I don't miss out on anything. And it made me stop playing the first Bayonetta because the game became so hard even on the normal mode that I just couldn't progress. And I was afraid that I wouldn't get the full game, which I don't even think is a thing anymore, but it's from those games in the 2000s and the late 90s that kind of bred that into me, that you wouldn't get access to the full game if you played it on easy mode.
And there's games nowadays, I mean, maybe not like this year super current, but in the past few years that they do have sort of like the easy mode mockery. You can find YouTube videos. I'm not going to pull up examples right now of like that they put some item on you or did something or whatever it was and like made fun of you or pointed out that you're playing on easy mode. Whatever. I played BioShock on easy mode. I wanted to see what the fuss was about. I don't regret it. I had a lot of fun. A couple of weeks ago, I'm bringing up Metal Gear Solid again. It's been on the brain, especially because of this weekend I'm about to tell you about. A friend of mine, he has moved to Japan, and before he left, he wanted to do like a big Metal Gear Solid day. And so we went to his place. He has the Metal Gear Solid Legacy Collection. turned on the second game, Sons of Liberty, which I had played through, but not everybody had played through, and we were all going to take turns on it because a couple people there, it was their first time seeing the game. They'd seen the first one, and so we put it on very easy. And I'll be damned if that wasn't the most fun Sunday, because it encouraged us to do the wackiest, dumbest things, because on very easy mode, if you just left that area and did a loading, the alarms were off. Is that the intended way to play? They put it in there, and it was a hell of a lot of fun, and it led us to experimenting with crazy ideas, which is all sorts of stuff built into the fabric of that game. So at the end of the day, like, what content didn't we get? We only fought 3 Metal Gear Rays instead of 25. I'm not weeping over that. The story was there. The conversations were still there. And it was a very, very fun time. And it did nothing to make fun of us for picking very easy. It was just there.
Yeah. I mean, going back off of Matt's point, talking about like trepidation when going into games, and sort of your point with like the enjoyment factor, I wonder if some of this is sort of the dilemma the industry has to go through, in that the generation that sort of launched the modern popular video gaming culture, if you want to say it that way, like with sort of like the Nintendo era people, you know, like has grown up, and that has brought new challenges. Like the ability to say like, okay, I'm going to dedicate a week to learning how to play a video game that is designed to be punishingly difficult is not something that I have anymore. Like I'm not really a gamer anymore because I just don't have the time because I have a mortgage. Like it's a different world now. And as a result, like if I want to play a video game because I enjoy the mechanics or I enjoy the story or any of that, I don't want to be behind a wall where I have to like go through like the trial by fire. You know, like I was so happy when Mega Man 9 came out, or was it 10 that had the
10 had easy mode.
Yeah, like that was great because like I'm not 8-bit Mega Man capable anymore. I used to be. I used to play all those games, but like it's not something I can handle as well. And like that's why I like the X series more, because you had more power and options, and it was a little more forgiving at times because you could catch yourself on walls and dash. You know, the ability to have like an easy mode was like a great way to be like, all right, well at least I get to like go through and see the cool set pieces and have the Mega Man feel, even if like, yes, I understand that like I will not have to spend nearly as much time memorizing like a disappearing block puzzle or something like that. You know, it's an adult concern that, you know, when they thought of video games as being just a kid's medium 20 years ago or 25 years ago, that was a different world.
Well, yeah, and I wanted to be clear that this is not a conversation against difficulty. I think that having difficulty modes in games is great, and it changes the range of the games, you know, and gives new challenges. For example, I recently bought the Crash Bandicoot Insane Trilogy for the Switch because I'm grateful that I held out for that and was able to get it so I have it portable. And I was playing one of the stages that the name of it is going to escape me now. But I kept dying over and over again, game over after game over after game over, and kept going back and trying to beat it. And I spent a whole day trying to beat it. And then finally, like, you know, on my train ride to work, on my train ride home from work, for hours at home, finally, after maybe 50 attempts, maybe close to 100 attempts, I beat it. I continued to slowly memorize the pattern of the stage until I finally beat it. That was so satisfying, enraging, but not in a way that made me want to put it down, and was satisfying to complete and defeat. And that had nothing to do with story. It had to do with platforming and the game just being hard as hell. And that I don't mind. Like those kinds of challenges, when I can see improvement and advancement in what I'm learning, is really satisfying. But then going back to a game like Bayonetta, where I'm fighting these 2 minion enemies, they're not even bosses, and I'm changing up my strategy every time, and it's more praying to RNGesus, this random generator of what the attacks will be to survive, is not a difficulty spike I enjoy, because then I'm just being punished for not constantly anticipating everything all the time and not having fun.
It's a very different set of patterns to learn, just the same as I have never, ever had the patience to really get into fighting games. I enjoy them. I find their off-the-wall absurdity absolutely delightful, and I own more than I really play because my wife's not a big fighting game player. So I got to wait till other people come over and it'd be like, you want to play some Tekken? But there's still a great deal of, you can learn the patterns. You can learn to anticipate these things. You can, but it's a different style of learning the board, of learning the field, of learning it all than it is in a platforming sense, like Crash Bandicoot, or overcoming specific challenges, certain boss fights, certain things like that. And those are not the challenges for you, Matt. Those are the challenges for another gamer. Those are a challenge for someone else. And the thing is, like, we talk of the difficulty things from when we were kids, and now there's the difficulty things now. Plenty of kids nowadays that are playing that stuff, and I would love to get an idea of how it's viewed, how these things are viewed by the youth of today.
I mean, it's probably the same as when we were kids, like, except with one big caveat. Like, when we were kids, we would play to death the games because those were the games we had, and so you do so. It's probably the same with the one caveat being that it is way easier to get games on any device. Like, almost all of them have online access, and if your parents are cool with it, then there's probably a way for you to get access to another game, or lots of, like, free options or things like that. Like, the fact that so many game systems are portable in some capacity means that you don't have to worry about the fact that you can load it on means you don't have to worry about, like, bringing enough games with you. So it's not like you're going to do a road trip where you're like, oh, I only brought the 3 Game Boy games I have, not the 3 other ones, because I only had space in this bag, or whatever example of that,
or however much memory they have on their device.
Yeah, because you can generally freely delete and re-download games. And that's usually fine, or at the very least, like, whenever your Wi-Fi's, it would be fine.
Yeah, you need Wi-Fi for it. It's sort of like same problems, different delivery method.
So the like, kids today, and adults today definitely have this problem, but kids today, I think, have a lesser version of it, but it's a problem that we did not have when we were kids, which is an abundance of things. So if it is difficult to play through a game, you might drift on to the next one, which is typically my problem with games that are too hard now, unless I've put time into it. Like, if it's too hard up front, I'm not going to be able to, like, find the fun in mastering the higher level difficulties.
Right. And it is a difficulty of focus. This is something Matt and I have talked about a lot in past episodes, as far as it is very easy to add to your collection as a gamer of any age and stripe. Some have it easier than others. Resources are a thing, but you kind of either need to get drawn in by a game or choose to focus on it. I have been playing my PS Vita a great deal recently because I am choosing to 100% complete Muramasa Rebirth, which is a Vanillaware developed game that has a whole bunch of collection stuff and 2 different characters. You got to play through both of their storylines completely in order to be able to unlock all the stuff. There's, like, challenge caves you've got to go through. But something I really appreciate about this game is every time you select your save file, you can choose. There's not so much a difficulty as there is bumpers. There is legend mode and chaos mode. The central conceit of combat in this game is it's sort of a side-scrolling action RPG, is like swordplay. So in legend mode, you get a lot more leeway in what's going on. If you hold down the attack button without releasing it, you sort of hold up your sword in a parry position, and your sword eventually loses durability and snaps. You can't just stand there and block all day. But it allows you to kind of, like, take on a couple of big crazy things. Or you can choose chaos mode, where that doesn't work, and you have to dodge and dash and roll through everything. And every time you load up the save file, you can choose which one you want to do. So if you want to choose to try chaos for a little while, you can. And if you want to go back to legend, go for it. And it doesn't reward you or punish you one way or the other. You still play through the story. You're still collecting the 108 demon blades of Muramasa. You're still doing all of that. But you get to choose how crazy or how much are you paying attention right now. And I appreciate that. Yeah.
Yeah, a lot more games have done that lately. Like, look at the Fallout and Elder Scrolls series. You can change the difficulty at any time. You can change it mid-mission, mid-battle, like anytime you want to change the difficulty. I believe the Mass Effect games work the same way.
And that's great for story games. That's perfect.
Yeah, because who knows? Maybe you're really great at the more strategic combat sections in Mass Effect, and so like picking off guys with a sniper rifle, you're really great at. But then in a giant scuffle where you're just surrounded by enemies, you're not as good, so you dump down the difficulty a bit to get through it. Like, I like the idea of that. I wish, and I'm hoping that as we go on, more games do that, because like I was saying, a game like Arkham Knight or a few others that I'm blanking on off the top of my head. The Devil May Cry series, infamously, like, you put the difficulty at the beginning. If you start to suffer, you're done. There's nothing you can do. As I recall, that's why I stopped Bayonetta. I could be wrong, and internet, feel free to yell at me if I am, and I'll go back to it. But I believe you can't change the difficulty once you start it, and I'm halfway through the story. So I don't want to start over again just because I want to play it on an easier mode, and that's why I dropped it.
Yeah, that was the breath of fresh air of games like Halo when you could switch up. Just you want to play this level. If you've unlocked it by virtue of having played the levels before it, you can choose whatever difficulty you want. And like, I was like, oh, this is great, because like, maybe I'm not that good at the Flood, but I was fine at all the other sequences before that. It's great. I mean, because other games sometimes you have to like go through essentially the same thing, but out of game ways. Like, my fiance is a big fan of a lot of the Rockstar games, but she's not great at some of the parts of the actual game. She just enjoys the stories.
There's a lot of moving parts to the gameplay.
So with like Red Dead, she just was not very good at any of like the races or any of like any of the major like horseback stuff. And so she would like come and grab me to come play it just for those chunks to get her through it, so that she could then go back to like the story stuff.
Yeah. Sarah right now is playing through Arkham Knight on PS4, and she's played through Asylum and City and absolutely loved it and was so excited to get Arkham Knight. And she is very good at Batmaning around. All of the combat, the takedowns, the like sneaking around, she's great at it. Arkham Knight brings in a whole new thing with the car combat. You are driving around in the Batmobile and you're fighting tanks and dealing with all sorts of stuff there. And it's a whole nother ball game. And she's getting frustrated, but she really likes being Batman. And so most of the time when I pop my head into the living room and see where she is, she's usually dealing with a car sequence. She always gets past it, but it's like, it's that same thing as that level in Crash Bandicoot where it'll take 10 times, 20 times. But what's nice is whether adjustable difficulty or things like this, if you can adjust the difficulty, if you have autosave as good as it is, you don't go back very far when you keep losing.
Right.
And that is a nice evolution from the arcade mentality of, well, you only had 3 continues, and now you got to go all the way back to the beginning of the game. Whoops.
Yeah, that was always another thing that was very punishing about difficulty, is like the idea of limited continues and limited lives. And so you're still punishing people. If you die 10 times, that's it. You're done. You got to start all over again. Like, I don't think that's necessary anymore. I think, and I'm grateful for that, most games have an autosave feature, and a functional one at that. So if you die, and get a game over, you just go back to whatever the last autosave was and then continue from there.
Yeah, it's why I enjoyed the first 2 Oddworld games so much. You could quick save wherever you wanted. You wanted to try this see if you can possess that slig. Want to try to get past that mine? Quick save. You died. Oh, you're back. And it's really, I think it comes down to the style of experience the game wants to give you.
Yeah, like getting back to the choice about lives, like if that's a difficulty factor, that's a choice, but you shouldn't be making it punishingly difficult and restricting people to how often they can get through, unless you have a very clear idea of why you're doing the thing.
Yeah, going back to Bloodstained Ritual of the Night, they've had their Curse of the Moon nostalgic throwback game come out, and I love it. And one of the things you can do, and it's again, every time you start it up, I think even when you pause, you can change it. You can do a little more of a modern style, or you can have it control and play like you're playing Castlevania on the NES. and I don't know how anything else feels because that's what I pick every time. And not because it need and it's not because I need to prove anything to anybody. I'm not streaming it. I'm not like as soon as I beat it gonna go online and be like, screw you fucking nards. I can do this. Screw you. It's just I really enjoyed playing the old NES Castlevania games. And this game is a love letter, a throwback. It's practically just a reskin of like great memories. And I haven't completed it yet. I've lost it a little bit here and there, but I'm doing that because I enjoy it. I know that I can pick the modern version if I want, or if I want to check it out. It's nice.
And I can speak to the modern version because I beat the hell out of that game playing it on the casual modern version. So I didn't like the knockback when you get hit and the harder controls. And so I picked the other mode, but it did always give me the option to pick the other one. But I beat it with the main character, with all the characters on the harder difficulty, like all of it. And it's because it gave me that access to play the game with controls that I would feel comfortable with and that wouldn't punish me. And so that's what kind of inspired a part of this conversation too, is this idea that you get to choose your experience. And I think when it comes to difficulty, at the end of the day, that's what has to be the goal. It shouldn't be restricting any story. It should have fun bonuses that only the skilled players get, because I think there should be some reward for beating your head against the wall on a harder
There should be
difficulty.
something, yeah.
But I think also the easiest mode should allow everyone access to the basics that the game has to offer. I don't think you should be punished for wanting to play that way, because there's so many people who got into gaming from so many different places now, with so much cross promotion and crossover, that to restrict that kind of experience just doesn't make sense anymore, especially if you want to sell your product. Like, at the end of the day, you want people to buy your stuff. And if you make it so people playing on very easy only get to see 30% of the game, then anyone who's not great at video games is now not going to buy your game because of that.
And there are certain games, too, where you don't even necessarily, for those sort of rewards, you don't even necessarily need to create a difficulty level. There are just challenges that can happen. I'm racking my brain here. Maybe you guys can help me out. Did either of you play through the original Ninja Gaiden on the Xbox?
I played a lot of it. I never beat it, though.
I tried.
I seem to recall there was a huge reward you could get if you played through a vast majority of the game using the wooden practice sword.
Oh, yeah. Well, you just for upgrading it a bunch, it turned into like this awesome greatsword.
Yeah, okay, that's what it was. And
yeah, it took a while. Like, the upgrade system, like, it took a lot relative to all the other weapons to actually see any improvement. And once it did, it became like one of the best weapons.
And that's fantastic. You don't need to, like, I'm pretty sure there was easy, medium, hard on Ninja Gaiden, but even built within that, it's what do you want to devote your time and effort to? Do you want to overcome the challenges? Do you want to get this best item that is sort of a weird off-kilter thing? Do you just want to experience the story? I mean, when developers create a game, they are sort of setting the context of what kind of experience they want. Curse of the Moon is a throwback platformer, but it has some allowances for modern sensibilities, much like Shovel Knight does. Something like Dark Souls is not going to relent, but that's Dark Souls. And I don't see it being in any other way, but that's the context of the experience. But when you can have that sort of maneuverability, even within just those couple of selections, it's, I find you get more rewarding experiences.
Well, yeah, games like Ninja Gaiden and Dark Souls and Demon Souls, those games are designed to break you. I remember...
You know what it's about.
Right. And even the original Devil May Cry, which I suffered through, and it's still one of my favorite series, but like the modern Ninja Gaiden was so hard on the Xbox. I died to that first boss so many times that I threw my disc across the room and shattered it. Like, I just was so angry.
Oh my God.
But that said, with Devil May Cry, I did suffer through because I guess maybe I got the mechanics better or whatever. Like, it's such a game-to-game experience. But, just like I like playing Dark Souls with my friends online, but by myself, I am terrible at it. those kinds of games are designed for that experience, and those are just not games for me for the most part. I don't want to suffer through my experience, but some people want to. Some people want that insane challenge for bragging rights and because it's what they find fun and exhilarating.
It's a because it's their sort of feeling. And I
Yeah.
mean, Dark Souls does have that online component where it's meant to be a little confusing at first, a little lost. And so people leave notes to guide you along the way. And you can choose to follow or ignore those. You can leave notes yourself, and you can leave misleading notes too. So there is that. But something I would love to see happen, because there is a certain amount of like toxic ego in only playing on the hardest modes, of making fun of easy mode. I want to see some games where, rather than babying or infantilizing people who pick easy mode, like as you pick harder and harder modes, it's progressively and progressively, like either the names of the difficulty are sillier and sillier, or you're a hard toting, like gun wielding guy, and you pick very hard and you have a baby's bonnet on the entire time. And like, there's changes, and are you okay with that? Like, and
Yeah, well, I mean, you could do games where, kind of like how people perceive the original Pokemon as having a easy, medium, and hard mode depending on which Pokemon you chose. Like, you could make it where, like, if you go on hard mode, it is the same game. You just have restricted starting gear or things like that. Although depending on the game, that tends to be not really applicable by the end. But then most games still have like stuff that gets dropped later on. So
yeah. But yeah, you definitely, some of it's just change of numeric values. Some of like easy mode, you start with more life, or you have a higher capacity for items or ammo. There's a lot of different things. I mean, there's the argument that Chris and Jill in the original Resident Evil, Chris is hard mode, Jill is easy mode, because she gets a lockpick and 2 more item slots. And she starts with a gun. Chris has to find the gun. He has another key he has to get. And it's not just picking one or the other. And we can we can talk about whatever imagery, allegory, whatever you want about all that till we're blue in the face. But we don't reach conclusions on this show.
That is definitely true. Well, I guess a good wrap up would be maybe, and I'll go first to give you guys a chance to think about it, but what's the hardest game you've ever played that you could not continue playing? And for me, I go old school for that. The hardest game that I've still never beat and that I can't even play anymore, and I think we've talked about this before on the show, Jeff, is the original TMNT game on the Nintendo.
Yes.
I could never get past the dam, but I had a friend who could get past disarming the bombs on the dam and could get all the way to the Technodrome. And then once he got to the Technodrome, he said, "By the way, I'm done." And we're like, "What do you mean you're done?" He's like, "Oh, I can't beat this part. You guys had trouble with the dam. I had trouble with this part. I'm not playing anymore." And so, like, we would all try and scramble to play and continue from where we left off. And, of course, we died instantly. Like, that game, I don't think I've still to this day seen the ending, although I could probably YouTube it. But
Right.
it's easily one of the hardest games I've ever played, and I've never finished.
I feel like NES games are going to be like ripe for that kind of material. So I'm going to try to think of one that's not.
Yeah, I'm trying to think of the ones that have TMNT, the original one, was I made it past the dam, but I also wasn't sure exactly what I was supposed to do. So I didn't get any when I was a kid. Like, maybe as an adult I might do a little better. Let me think. I've beaten most of the Mega Mans.
Yeah.
I mean, I've never been able to beat Contra without the 30-man code.
Yeah, I think that's a given for everybody. Though.
That's a given.
Right, but we're also talking about games where you wouldn't play anymore. So it's not just games that are hard that you hit your wall. Just it's games that are like so hard that you've had to like stop. Because like there's quite a few games where I know I've not beaten them. Like half the games that came out on the SNES Mini, I was like, oh, this is great because I played a lot of it, but I don't think I ever actually beat the following games. But I don't think there's any one of them that I wouldn't actually play.
Right.
I mean, if there's one that you wouldn't play, or if there's not one that you wouldn't play, then maybe what's the hardest game in your opinion that you've ever played? We can do that, and TMNT would still be my answer.
Yeah, that's up there. I
Yeah,
don't
or
know,
at least
man.
they
You
had
ever,
like
you ever play
trepidation about-
Battletoads?
Yeah, Battletoads is
Yeah.
up there.
I'm trying to think. I feel like there's a couple of NES games from my youth that like I'm blanking on, but are ones like I don't know what I'm doing. I can't get past the There are times when I've painted myself into a corner in a game. Like I was playing through Final Fantasy 13 and got to I think the second Bartandalus fight. And I wasn't quite prepared, but the save already happened, and I just I've never gone back. I should start that again.
That was me with Final Fantasy X. I screwed up the sphere grid so bad using teleport spheres that I couldn't effectively level up my characters anymore.
Right. Yeah, I got to Grand Pulse, and I really didn't do enough good grinding. And, I mean, it's not like you need to grind and grind and grind, but there's a couple of things. So, maybe if I come back to it another time, I'll have a better idea and I'll start better. But, now Battletoads is up there.
Okay, so I'm looking up the exact name right now because I can't remember precisely what it was called. This one's sort of in the frustrating capacity, not so much in the, like, strictly the game was just hard. But the first Sonic game that came out for the Wii, it was like something Rings or something like that.
Sonic and the Secret Ring.
Secret Rings. Yeah, so that one I could not finish playing because of frustration with the actual mechanics. But the thing that frustrated me about it especially, and why I wanted to bring it up for this, is that it was exactly what I thought a Wii Sonic game should have been. And like I felt was a better concept for a game than a lot of the Sonic games at the time or since, where it's just like, oh, it's an open, like an infinite runner with like sort of motion-y controls, like made sense to me as being like, this is what you should do for that kind of game, since that's what we had been talking about for Sonic games for so long, and like the dilemma of the 3D Sonic game had come into play. But it was just not a game that I could finish because like the actual motion controls were just not that good.
I remember the hardest game. Sonic the Hedgehog 2 for the Game Gear.
Ooh. Oh my god, actually, yes, that's the best example.
That is easily the best example.
Oh god damn it! I that for a long time that was my only Game Gear game, and I played it to death. But I don't think I ever cleared the third level.
The freaking antlion at the end of the underground zone.
The first level,
on the Master System version, it is a larger resolution, and
you
it
can
is
see
it's
everything.
a cakewalk. And
Yeah.
I have now that I have a Game Gear again, and I am collecting like crazy for that thing. And I'm playing through Sonic the Hedgehog 2 every now and again. I can now get past that guy like it's nobody's business. But the challenge is actually completing the game because you can't finish the game until you have all the emeralds. And you only get them in Act 2 of each zone. And some of them are in some really weird spots. Underground Zone's easy, Aquaplan's easy. Like, really, the hard one is Sky High Zone, the second zone in the game. You need to know precisely which, like, springs that are hidden in clouds amongst all the other storm clouds that you'll just fall through will catapult you to get to the very top of the level at just the right point to pick up that emerald. There's hang gliders, but that is a fool's errand to try to do. So being able to finish the game and getting that and getting... because you can't get to the final zone unless you have all those rings. You fight Metal Sonic in the Scrambled Egg Zone, the penultimate zone, and beating him, he gives you the emerald if you have all the others. Otherwise, you get the bad ending. I have played every level because I did the stage select cheat, but I have still, to this day, never finished that game. I'm gonna. Just you wait.
I'm in that same ballpark, except I don't want to go back.
Looks like we found yours.
Yes, and this challenge is not for... I'm not saying everyone should do it. I'm doing it. And that's okay.
Yeah, I think Ace is right, though. I think the hardest games for most of us, like, I've never beaten the original Ninja Gaiden. I've gotten to like the same fourth or fifth level in it, but I've never finished it. Like, I think, but again, it goes back to this idea that we have to make these games punishing because we want people to keep playing them because they only have 3 games. Whereas now it's like I have so many games between Steam, my Switch, and my PS4 that like I don't think I will ever finish them all. In fact, I've pretty much resigned myself to that.
Yeah, no, and that is a shame because I'm sure in your Steam library there's a cornucopia of great gaming experiences, and some of it may be because we are like spoiled for choice that we don't put the time in that is required, and it's not even probably not that much time, but there's so many options. You're like, well, no, I stop, and there's all of these factors we've talked about. It's an interesting landscape, and I feel the three of us come from very similar-ish perspectives.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of where our demographic is sitting right now, I think.
Yeah, I'd say so. Thank you, Case, for joining us on this episode. It's always a pleasure to have you on the show with us.
Thank you for having me on.
You can, of course, catch Case on both the Scruffy Nerf Herders podcast, which is a D&D style Star Wars story. And of course, he is featured on the Certain Point of View podcast, which we've been on as well. And he has his own podcast, Another Pass, which both Jeff and I have been on
this week,
separately.
actually.
Yeah, this week. And separately as well as now finally together. So
yeah,
it's fun being on a network.
The episode would have dropped yesterday for when this is coming up.
Yep. So
Excellent.
Definitely go check that out. Of course, also listeners, if you have either difficult game experience, a game experience based on difficulty that you want to share, we'd love to hear it. Or if you think we're whiny baby boys and that we should toughen up because you think that difficulty is the penultimate, tell us why. I'm curious why people engage in extremely difficult games, because for me, the frustration outweighs the reward. But, I perfectly would understand if someone likes to beat their head against the wall until they get through. And I'd love to know what your experience is like with these more difficult games. And if you think the reward is worth the risk as well. Completing these games on those harder difficulties and the things you get for it, is it worth it? Would you still do it even if you get nothing for it? Things like that.
Oh, yeah. Like, we want to hear your opinions. Fight me, nerds.
Right. Of course, you can always check us out on Facebook, on Twitter. Our podcast is wherever you find podcasts. Please engage with us via Twitter, Facebook, or email. That's the place that is easiest to reach us. We always love hearing from you all.
Yes, thank you for keeping the conversation going. Thank you so much for listening. I'm Jeff Moonen.
And I'm Matt, a.k.a. Stormageddon.
And happy gaming.